opened my cellar for the 350th time. Actually, those are just the numbered ones. There was a bunch of them I did before that. But anyway, 350. I consider that a strange milestone. Never thought I'd still be doing it 350 times later. What started out as a lark. As for theater of the mind, you'd be surprised how many modern players can't even fathom playing like this. Unfortunately, Wizards, starting with 4E, has successfully convinced them that they have to have a giant grid, count squares, and use miniatures in order to play. Yeah, because that sells more shit for the Wizards. Not because you need it. It's interesting. This thing I'm looking forward to doing at the end of the month at UC is about using role-playing. It's called Role-Playing in the Humanities. This, I don't know, Chautauqua was, I don't know what exactly. It's not a lecture thingy. It's a gathering to share ideas. And theater of the mind is very important in what I do, and the product I developed, the project I developed for using in the classroom. And it's not role-playing, but it's an assumption of roles. And then reacting to events. And anyway, we have no visual aids or anything like that. They all make their own mental pictures of what they look like and how they dress and what have you, and we go from there. You certainly don't need all that stuff. We never needed all that stuff. And I'm not going to go back and tell you hoary old tales of the past when we were making our figures out of dinosaur bones. But we didn't need. The only time we required to have some physical token was to help people with the theater of their mind in a large scale, like a melee, however you pronounce it. And I try to use both. Anyway, so, okay, you guys are all the white dice and the orcs are all the orange dice. And that just helped people become more adept at spatially in their heads. Never as a substitute, but as a teaching aid on how to work in their heads. Yeah, you don't need all that stuff. And the theater of the mind is absent because not enough of the young players were read to, where they let themselves be carried away to where the story was telling them they were or where they were going. Shame that. Some questions about product distribution back in the day. How did TSR distribute the original game of D&D, and when did they know they had a hit on their hands? Well, we distributed our product just like everybody else back in those days. There were many regional distributors scattered around the country, and games weren't one of their only thing. They might distribute model kits and paints and brushes, and they supplied the smaller stores, the grassroots stores. And we distributed through them, selling them at a discount, and back with in the mid and late 70s, we had a policy of making a retail price 6 to 9 times the cost that we had in it. And that was because we had to discount it so deeply to distributors so that they could make some money, and then the hobby shop owner could make some money. We were distributing something 30, 10, and 2, 30%, 10%, 30% of done in 10, and then 2% more of done in 10. Anyway, they were getting them for a a little over 40% off. And so for us to have anything left, any meat on that bone, that's why we had to price the way we did, because then we had costs and the royalties and stuff on the other end. Wasn't like we were dividing up dollars, more like dimes. When did we know we had a hit on our hands? In my mind, the Dallas Egbert being lost in the steam tunnels episode was when it took off. We were growing up to that point. There were lots of little indicators, more and more conservative or religious types getting upset about it, more of that type of thing. And as that built, we knew that we're reaching more people, and it's starting to grow. And then with the Egbert thing and the reprints right after that, never looked back. How did the distribution practices change during your time at TSR? No. At the time I was there were still a number of regional distributors. It wasn't like it is now with just 2 or 3 large ones that cover everything and everybody. No, it didn't change much. We might have started giving slightly better discounts to the large distributors for volume, but that wasn't my thing. I didn't worry about it. The only time I got into distribution is sometimes I'd go down, and count copies and stick them in boxes to mail off in the beginning, with the first, issues. Get all the other ones ready and take them to the post office. Not much. How difficult is it to distribute magazines when you're running adventure gaming? Nearly impossible, because the mom and pop shops were starting to close down. Some of the smaller regional distributors were going out of business or merging with another one. And so our avenues of distribution, the number of water hoses we had for the garden was being diminished. So it was not easy. How did we advertise adventure gaming? Well, I had the advantage of it created a lot of buzz when I left and TSR, and several people involved in what we were going to do, people at Parthland that started bragging around the cons with the other dealers and that yeah, he's coming to us in Cincinnati, and we're going to do our own thing here. And so we created some buzz. The buzz surrounding my leaving, those things happened. Unfortunately, we walked right into the teeth of a minor recession, and a whole lot of mom and pop shops went out of business, and we lost, all of us, we being in the industry, we lost all direct touch with the little stores because they were gone. Excuse me. Okay, on a sad note, I read this. I think you'll have heard of Ernie Gygax's passing. Yes. I'm sure you'll join me in wishing him rest in peace. Yes. You are a little presumptive, though. I suppose it doesn't diminish Ernie's memories to point out that he made some poor choices of running mates some time back. But who can present a perfect record in this life? If it's not too much to ask, would you share some stories, some of your memories of Ernie? Yeah, Ernie made some bad decisions. Some when he was out in California, the lifestyle he tried to live, and the things he did to his system. And Ernie, he would have told you he was an alcoholic for a while. Well, he was in recovery for a long time before he passed. I guess that's the way you note that. And yeah, he got in with some really shithead people in the pseudo revival of TSR in Lake Geneva. I think that Ernie was conned into investing a bunch of his own money, and the con man wanted to hang this endeavor on the letters TSR and the name Gygax through Ernie. And that didn't turn out well for anybody, including the con man, who's been sued nearly into oblivion. However, still shows up crapping on other people's posts and videos. When I went up there, Ernie was 15 or 16 and in high school. Hi, how you doing? I'm Tim Kask. I work for your dad. Hi, I'm Ernie. That's, my very, very minimal contact at first. Ernie was still in school, and school was a big deal with Gary and Mary, and he was, kept nose to the grindstone. And we didn't see a lot of him. Sometimes he'd show up on a weekend, which I wasn't always on weekends because of my situation living 12 miles away where I did actually live. But occasionally I'd see him on weekends or an evening, very rarely on an evening session of a play test. But time went on, and Ernie was a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Always had a smile. Kind word, usually. Never saw him angry, I don't believe. I liked him, and like his dad, I'll miss him. He's 10 years younger than I am. Well, he was, and that's a shame to be cut short. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. They're going to do something at Gary Con on Sunday morning at 9, and if it's not terribly long and I can get out of there reasonably quickly. I don't want to sound callous, but I have to time it to miss the shit in Chicago, because I go around Chicago, and if I don't time it right, it takes twice as long to get half the distance around the bottom of Chicago. So I'm not trying to be callous. I'm trying to be practical, because that drive gets harder every year on me, on Jim. But I'll see what I can do in that regard. Okay. Most D&D players aren't all that serious, so no, I wouldn't expect a serious D&D movie. Interesting statement. Most D&D players aren't all that serious. Well, that would really depend on your exposure to people that you've met that play and what type of players they are. Because believe me, the nitpickers and the rules lawyer are deadly serious. Some people get too involved in their characters and suffer real, psychological pressures when something happens to their character. Thankfully, most players aren't like that, but there is a disturbing number, in my opinion. I don't know. Humor is so subjective. I can understand, on the one hand, writers wanting to break the tension, but on the other hand, sometimes that tension's good. You ramp up and ramp up and ramp out, and you're more and more intense. That's not a bad thing. You don't have to diffuse it. You don't have to go for the giggle, for the relief the giggle gives. Okay, now, I don't know what happened to my printer today, but it went bug shit. And so I've got some duplicated pages in this mess. So bear with me as I sort them out on the fly. On combining RPGs and war games, 25 years ago, in the early days of D&D 3E, I would run campaign along with Wargame campaign using the chainmail rules for 3E. Miniature battles in chainmail could influence the narrative in the RPG and vice versa. The players who participated in both had a good time, though there were players who'd play the Wargame and not the RPG campaign and vice versa. We just had to be careful with the power levels in the Wargame, especially with magic, since it could make the scenario one-sided and no fun. Yeah, I can certainly understand what you're saying there. I remember in the Falmouth campaign that I played in a few years here, that when seen on a battlefield, by God, that dragon's breath was an impressive weapon. And so you had to be careful like that. Let's see. He goes on. A few years later, I experimented with the original chainmail rules with an OD&D game. In my opinion, those rules still hold up. Smart man, or woman, as the case may be. But I've never tried swords and spells. That's right, apparently not too many people did. What Gary tried to do with swords and spells was meld all together, a new form of chainmail in a different shirt, and mass rules. Because when we did that, mass rules for medievals and ancients were a big thing in miniatures, and so Gary and TSR wanted to be there for people to step into from where they had, because let's face it, lots and lots of medieval stuff look great in a fantasy game. All right. Anyway, okay. Listening to you talk on Saturday mornings is a welcome respite from all the bullshit going on in the world right now. Okay, Kara. Thank you. And that's why I don't get political here. If you want to know where my politics lay, just look at my Facebook post. I think that the store you were referring to was just outside of campus, may have been Book World over in South Illinois. And I think you might be right. Thank you. I used to skip out of my high school journalism regional show to spend hours upon hours wandering their stacks. I remember there was a comic store next door when I was there in the mid-'80s. Well, that wasn't there then for me. And yes, there was also that little shop in Murfreesboro you mentioned, where I dashed it off to when I thought I could get away with it to buy my little black book copies of Traveler. When I was at my first GaryCon back in 2015, seems like a lifetime ago, don't it? Yeah, tell me. I had the good in fact, 2015. I don't think any of my great-grandchildren had been born yet, and tomorrow I'm going to have my 7th. They have to induce her. Well, it'll be yesterday for you. Let's see, where would I lost it. Okay, I had good fortune to meet Mark Miller, and he was kind enough to sign my old Traveler book that had followed me around the country since those very early days. Funny how a $10 softback book slowly turned into a personal artifact that I'll pass to my kids eventually. Yeah, isn't it? I have somewhere, safely tucked away, one of my father's 6-sided dice. I had them both at one time, but they were so old and what they were made out of cracked and came apart. But he used to play in craps or AC-doocy. Not anything like I do. But yeah, I got a bunch of dice. My kids want them. They're welcome to them. Did you have many interactions with that crew from GDW down in Normal in the mid-late 70s? Yes, we did. I recall the form the Traveler took when it was published was copied from the White Box D&D from 74. Whoop, got to correct you here. 74 was brown box. Brown wood grain box, white large label on the front. The white box was a later reprint when we could no longer get the brown boxes. But that aside, it was still the same game inside and the same 3 books inside. But just clear that up. Yeah, well, there was a reason all those games were that size and shape, and that was because it was an easy, inexpensive way to do it on small presses when everything was still either offset or actually using type, hot lead type. Okay, now we're going to jump around a bit. I've been pondering a scenario for my next campaign that I'll have your take on. One of my players wants to introduce a colossal wand of fireball or lightning. And by colossal, I mean something closer to a siege engine, battering ram than a wizard's dainty little stick. Picture a redwood-sized wand, crystal head as big as a golf cart, operable only by high level with biceps like a blacksmith. All right. It gets better, he says, but I'm going to stop here. Why? Why? Build a bombard. Build a trebuchet of enormous size. Why? No, I wouldn't allow it. Absolutely not. Where are you going to get a crystal as big as you describe? It has to be a good, near perfect crystal to work, or else it would shatter and release untold amounts of arcane energy and everybody in the radius and turn them into slime worms. Or something even worse. Why? No. All right. This is the better part. What are your thoughts on bundling multiple wands into a Roman fasces of arcane devastation? Would they all fire at once? Would they explode spectacularly? Would the wizard need to roll a strength check just to lift the thing? Well, I'll tell you. Once again, it's always good to encourage your players to think outside the box and try new things. But I have so many questions on this second one. How do you get that many wands? Wands should be rather rare. A good wand can be the object of a quest. Would it let them all fire simultaneously? No. You know why? Harry Potter. All wands have a different component on the inside, so they cannot be perfectly simultaneously synced. No. The cost would be astronomical, and because everything must have the possibility of a crock, of a failure, minor, catastrophic, whatever in between. Invest all that time, all that money, all those precious materials, and you get a crock? Well, that's like, oops, the bomb went off by mistake out in New Mexico. And all those people we had around trying to set, they're not here anymore. Yeah, to quote the player. Or would you just shake your head and tell the player, no, you absolute lunatic? Something like that. Let's see. All right, pardon me, we're into strange printings again. Strange copies. Anymore. There's more. know how long I've been talking. Let's see. No, that looks like. Okay. Now this is a long read, but it's a classic, and it teaches a classic lesson. Picture this. My neighbor and I are in 4th grade, completely mesmerized by his older brother, a high school junior, and his friends as they rolled weird dice, battled monsters, and consulted arcane, eye-watering tables. The only reason I even got interested in the game because of the 80s artwork. Those covers screamed adventure, practically yanking my brain into some otherworldly fantasy realm. Naturally, we pestered the older brother until he caved and agreed to DM for us. And thus, 2 murder hobo fighters were born. Armed with 2-handed swords and 0 impulse control, we rampaged through our first dungeon like 2 barbarian toddlers on a sugar high. Let's go killing at the zoo. Yeah, you know, I wrote a set of lyrics for that song. That's the name of it, is Let's Go Killing at the Zoo. Because that was used to the early dungeons that all of us made their first and very days. We're like, okay, what's behind this door? Kill it. How many points is it worth? Then we started writing articles and publishing articles about ecology of the dungeon. Let's see, back to where I was. Eventually slaying a white dragon the size of a velociraptor because reasons. We were unstoppable. Then the power hunger set in. We wanted 18s on all stats, +5 swords, -10 armor, boots of speed, poison weapons, horn of blasting, ring of flying. Basically, we wanted to become 2 medieval freight trains. To our surprise, the DM said, "Sure, take it all." And we thought we'd won. We were gods. Then the consequences hit. Suddenly, roving bands of equally overpowered highwaymen started ambushing us. Monsters got wicked smart and way stronger and started using poison weapons, and worst of all, our characters mysteriously started getting sick mid-adventure. +5 swords don't help much when you're feverish, vomiting, and suffering from medieval dysentery. I don't think any kind of dysentery is a good one to suffer from, but yeah, your point, yes. It didn't take long for us to figure out the brilliant evil lesson our DM was giving. The game isn't about having something, it's about the struggle. Having everything, it's about the struggle. If we gave up our ridiculous gear, the world would stop trying to kill us with extreme prejudice. More importantly, we learn not to get too attached to our characters. They died? Who cares? Roll up a new one and get back in the game. Looking back, that was some next level DM wisdom. He never said no. He just let natural selection handle it. And honestly, it made for an unforgettable adventure. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane. And let me know your thoughts on the siege. Yeah, well, you know my thoughts on those siege-sized, boy, there's a tongue twister in the making, weapons. On war games to role-playing, kinda. My first experience with a TTRPG was my brother and I modifying Risk. Around 8-9 years ago, we watched Lord of the Rings extended cut for the first time. My brother got into fantasy world building, which is one of the seminar panel things I'm going to be involved in at the end of the month. We eventually tried to play it as a game. Through osmosis, I knew we needed character sheets and dice, and the only game we had with multiple dice was Risk. It was fun. I was the GM, and we used Risk fighting rules for arbitration. It had its issues, but I got into D&D later because of it. Yeah, it's amazing what gets us in, isn't it? What got me in? Probably the fact that my parents were beginning to wonder if I was ever going to get out of the sandbox. I had a little sister. I was about 11 or 12, and I was doing H.G. Wells type battles in the sandbox. I had the little Marx cannons and fired, except my little Marx cannons fired ladyfingers. And if it blew over the guy, he was dead. So that's probably where mine came from. Army men in the sandbox. Generic term for a kid growing up in the 50s. Army men. Didn't matter if they were knights or Civil War soldiers or World War II. Didn't matter. They were army. Cowboys, Indians, they were army men. Well, occasionally cowboys and Indians might get a distinction. If you have the time, find the description of a megalith from Menser's Immortal Rules. Could be they got the idea of a sentient planet from you. No. I've never read Immortals, never read any of those, but I know that I wrote what I wrote long after the Immortals had been published. And I can only assure you that I didn't get it from them. It just came to me. I have to believe in the theory that multiple people can have the same good idea. I've seen it happen way too many times to not believe in it. So I'm not going to say I'm the only one who could have had that idea, or that they were the only one, and I took it from them. No, spontaneous invention. Rogues. I use rogue as a fourth class as a sort of catch-all for any dex-based type fighter. I'm thinking that on the first couple of short intros that I run at the library, we're starting in April, I'm going to make them all rogues. And, like a traveling troupe of acrobats and whatever. And some of them can pick pockets, and I don't know, I haven't decided yet. But I don't want to get into killing and slaying right away. Let's get them into living by their wits first. Anyway, I'm thinking. Only 4 classes and skills per se are based on your PC's background. No big list of skills with points assigned to each ability. Just, you are a farmer? Okay, you can ride a horse and know how to hitch it to a wagon. You're a sailor? Yeah, you can climb across ropes and rigging, know some basic navigation, can read the tides, etc. Both these guys can probably do a better job of predicting the weather than a person who grew up in a monastery copying manuscripts. But the scribe has a better chance of having read and remembers some esoteric bit of lore than the other 2 guys. Good point. You should be able to do a backstory in 1 paragraph or 3 sentences, and that should be all you're able to draw upon for anything you claim. I can do that. Okay. And a couple of people commented they liked the Honor Among Thieves. I didn't say I didn't. I don't want to believe I didn't like it. I was just let down or disappointed. I thought it could be more. But I enjoyed it. It was a good laugh. It's on Netflix right now, and I'm going to watch it again in the next 3 days. I've been planning on it. And make up a tub of popcorn and watch it. So, yeah, probably. And so, okay. And the other guy says, well, my expectations were pretty low to begin with, so no big deal. And that's fine. I'm just saying it certainly didn't take Hollywood by storm. It didn't attract people that weren't already D&D, or at least knew what D&D was. It didn't have eye-popping, jaw-dropping graphics to make people come see it just for the graphics. All right, paintball story. Yes, I waxed rhapsodic last week on the NL Spot paintball gun. You mentioned that the pellets hurt. They certainly did. especially at close range. A friend of mine happened to get the drop on a female player about 10 feet away. Being a gentleman, he didn't want to actually shoot her at that range because it would leave a mark. So he said something, I've got you. You're out, right? She said, yep, I'm out. You got me. My buddy lowered his nail spot, at which point she shot him square in the chest. Yes, women and men think differently. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily prove it. She just could have been a cheater. We used to get the worst cheaters. If you got marked by paint, you were out. And some guys hated it if it was splatter. If you were hiding behind a big briar bush and somebody popped a couple in there, you could get sprayed with paint. And you were out by the rules. Oh, no, it shouldn't count. It was, it was shrapnel, Some guys would try to wipe it off, cheat. Of course, I can remember cheating playing guns back when I was a kid, preteen, running around Tommy guns or flintlocks or whatever genre we were playing that day. Okay, I told you about the role-playing and the humanities thing that I'm doing. I'm going to do some on world-playing, on world-building, basing, using game mechanic type things as in the classroom. And I have one of those that I'll explain one day after I get a chance to see if it's commercially viable. I think it is. And I'm going to get to talk to a specialist in that area. I'm embarking on a trip. I'm sitting down in my time machine right here and putting my time machine right here, and I'm going to take a trip down that rabbit hole. I've dug out my old box of slides. I used to be quite the photographer. For many, many years. And I've probably got 40 or 50 boxes of slides, some of which I haven't looked at since, there's one that I dug out. It was the Bob Hope Christmas USO show on Christmas Eve, 1969, on board the carrier in the Gulf of Tonkin. And I don't remember if I was shooting color or black and white back then. I don't care. It's going to be fun. I've looked at a few of them up to the light, and I got a whole bunch of flight deck stuff that I'm interested to see again. Because I found a place where I could go up on the flight deck and nobody ever bothered me, and I took pictures of stuff I found out later, quite innocently, that I hadn't been supposed to take of. So I'm looking for those, too. And I have a bunch of pictures of my daughter when she was just new, so to speak. So I'm going to be taking a trip down that rabbit hole real soon, and we'll see how that works out. And I'm going to GaryCon later in the month. There'll be a week when there won't be an episode, but I'll tell you before it happens. And can't believe it. This has been the 350th. Wow. Here I thought it was just something I'd do for a little while to have fun during the pandemic, sort of. And then here we are. And there you are. So, keep playing. And kind of petered out here. Nothing strong to end on. Be sure to come to GaryCon. If you can. If you don't have tickets now, you're not coming. So for those of you who got the tickets, I'll see you at GaryCon in a couple of weeks. Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my Cellar.
The Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller Cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called in Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. TSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree,
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.